Imagine the chilling atmosphere of London at 7:30 a.m. on the 15th of May, 1536. Fog shrouds the Tower of London, but it cannot hide the scent of death hanging in the air. Today, English history will witness an unprecedented event, a reigning queen, the most powerful woman in the kingdom, dragged into the dock like a common criminal. Anne Boleyn, the name that once made all of Europe tremble, now faces the most disgusting accusations imaginable. Adultery, incest with her own brother, and plotting to kill the king. If found guilty, her punishment is not exile, but death. But is this truly a trial of justice, or is it a bloody play orchestrated by the most powerful men in the land? Welcome to the trial of the vultures, where justice is twisted and a woman's life is nothing more than a pawn on a political chessboard. Standing behind the velvet curtain of this trial is Thomas Cromwell, King Henry VIII's ruthless right-hand man. Just 3 years ago, he was the one who put Anne on the throne. But now, as Anne fails to produce a male heir and becomes a thorn in the king's side, Cromwell has become her executioner. He doesn't just want Anne gone, he wants her honor obliterated. For the past 13 days, Cromwell has worked tirelessly to cook the evidence, threaten witnesses, and handpick the jury. It is a plan perfect in every detail. He knows that if Anne survives, his own head will roll. This is not a trial of sin. It is a battle for survival between a lonely queen and a political tyrant. Stepping into the great hall of the Tower, Anne sees a sight that shatters her heart. Sitting on the judge's bench is none other than the Duke of Norfolk, her own uncle. This man, with eyes as cold as ice, once predicted Anne would be the ruin of the family. Today, he is here to fulfill that prophecy. But the pain doesn't stop there. Among the 26 jurors holding Anne's life in their hands sits Thomas Boleyn, her own father. Picture the ultimate cruelty. A father willing to sacrifice his daughter to protect his political standing. They sit there, men of her own blood, waiting to drive the final nail into Anne's coffin. This betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. While Anne faces the wolves at the Tower, where is King Henry VIII? He is hiding at Whitehall Palace, a few miles away, waiting for the cannon fire that signals Anne has been condemned to death. He dares not look into the eyes of the wife he once swore eternal love to. Henry's cowardice only highlights his cruelty. And not far away, in Chelsea, Jane Seymour, the king's new lover, is being treated like royalty. Henry moved Jane closer to him for convenience while his wife was on trial. An ultimate humiliation. While Anne fights for her life, Henry is dreaming of his next wedding. He has paved the road for Jane to ascend the throne, a road paved with Anne Boleyn's blood. "Bring in the prisoner!" the shout echoes. The doors open. The crowd of 2,000 holds its breath, expecting a broken woman, weeping and begging. But no. Anne enters, head held high, her sharp eyes sweeping across the hostile crowd. She does not look like a sinner, she looks like a queen, bestowing her presence upon them. Anne's composure terrifies Cromwell. She does not flinch under the scrutiny or the presence of her treacherous father. Anne knows her chance of survival is zero, but she is determined not to let them see her break. She sits in her chair, ready to face the coming storm. In the National Archives, there exists an old leather pouch known as the Bag of Secrets. Inside are the documents of the trial. But there is something strange. It contains only the prosecution's accusations. There are absolutely no records of Anne's defense. Why? Were her words so sharp, so convincing, that they had to be erased from history? The lengthy indictment accuses Anne of adultery with 5 men, including the king's closest friends like Henry Norris. They paint an image of Anne as a sex maniac, always following her carnal lusts, seducing men with kisses and suggestive touches. It is a cheap script written by misogynists, designed to turn a powerful queen into a promiscuous whore. Listen to one of Cromwell's ironclad proofs. Mark Smeaton, a court musician, confessed that Anne hid him in her marmalade closet and lured him into her bed. It is laughable. A queen always surrounded by dozens of ladies in waiting, how could she hide a man in a jam cupboard and have sex right under everyone's noses? But the absurdity didn't matter. What mattered was that Mark Smeaton confessed. Why? Because he was the only commoner among the accused. He was brutally tortured. A knotted rope was tied around his head and tightened with a cudgel until his eyes bulged out, and he screamed whatever Cromwell wanted to hear. That blood-stained confession became the knife that finished Anne. If adultery wasn't enough to kill Anne, Cromwell played the most disgusting card: incest. Anne was accused of having sexual relations with her own brother, George Boleyn. The indictment described in detail deep kisses, tongue-touching, and longing looks between the siblings. This was the most brutal psychological warfare. It transformed Anne from an adulteress into a monster against nature. The evidence? Nothing. But the fact that Anne and George were very close. But, in a rigged trial, rumor is stronger than truth. Cromwell knew that by planting this disgusting seed of doubt, Anne could never cleanse her name. Who was the star witness confirming this incest? It was George's own wife, Lady Rochford. This woman stood up to testify against her husband and her sister-in-law. Why would a wife push her husband into the jaws of death? Jealousy, hatred, or self-preservation? Whatever the reason, Lady Rochford's testimony was the final nail in the Boleyn siblings' coffin. She provided Cromwell with the ultimate weapon to completely annihilate her husband's family. It was a bloody family tragedy that even Shakespeare could not have written. But to ensure Anne died, Cromwell needed the charge of treason. The law stated that merely imagining the king's death was treason. Anne had once said to Henry Norris, "You look for dead men's shoes. If aught came to the king but good, you would look to have me." This careless remark, made in anger during a flirtatious argument, was twisted into an assassination plot. Cromwell argued that Anne was waiting for Henry to die so she could marry another. From a romantic dispute, it became a conspiracy to overthrow the throne, a perfect linguistic trap that Anne had walked right into. After hearing all the charges, the jury, including Anne's own father, retired to deliberate, but it was just a formality. The verdict had been written before the trial began. They returned almost immediately. Guilty. One word, heavy as a mountain. Anne was stripped of her crown, her titles, and her honor on the spot. She was no longer queen. She was just a discarded woman waiting to die. The entire hall fell silent, waiting for her reaction. Would she scream? Would she curse? The Duke of Norfolk, Anne's uncle, stood up to read the sentence. His voice did not tremble. "Thou shalt be burned here within the Tower of London on the green, or else to have thy head smitten off, as the king's pleasure shall be further known." Burned alive. That was the most painful death a human could imagine. Anne stood there, her face pale, but her head held high. She would not let these terrible men see her fear. She looked straight into her uncle's eyes, into her father's eyes, and smiled a smile of ultimate contempt. She had lost the Game of Thrones, but she had won her dignity. Anne stood and spoke her final words to the court. "I do not say I have always borne towards the king the humility I owed him. But God knows I have never done him any other wrong. An eloquent, intelligent, and dignified speech. But it was meaningless. Her fate had been decided by Henry's lust and Cromwell's ambition. The cannons roared, signaling the verdict had been passed. Henry heard it and smiled. The path to Jane Seymour was wide open. Meanwhile, George Boleyn was dragged into the courtroom right after his sister. His fate was also sealed. The Boleyn dynasty collapsed in a single day. 2 days later, from her cell window, Anne could see or hear the crowd cheering on Tower Hill. The 5 men accused with her, including her brother George and her close friends, were beheaded one by one. Blood stained the scaffold red. Each falling head was a brutal reminder of the death approaching Anne. She was left alone, isolated within 4 cold stone walls, waiting for the mercy of a husband-turned-monster. Will Henry grant her a pardon at the last minute, or is the executioner's blade waiting to take the last breath of the Fire Phoenix? Join us for the next part to witness the haunting final hours of Anne Boleyn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. Do you think Anne was innocent or guilty? The truth may be darker than you ever imagined.